Okay, so good day to each and everyone, especially to our beautiful instructor, Mrs. Fergrace Cataylo. I am Jeric Louie Cabusog together with my partner, Mr. Neño Cabugnason. So we are the group 4. Our topic for today is the chapter 5, which is gender fair language. So before we start our topic, we would like to introduce our learning outcomes or objectives. So first, identify the ways language discriminates against women. Second, state forms of discrimination in language. And the third, explain how gender fair language can be realized. So, language and gender relations. So, language is a potent tool for how humans understand and participate in the world. So, what is the relationship between gender and language use? So, gender differences in language use appear early. Girls are more likely to use language in the context of emotional relationships with others, while boys are more likely to use language to describe objects and events. So, when you look around, you might notice that for the most part, masculinity and femininity are represented in a number of different ways, from the way people dress to how they wear their hair. All of these choices are sending a message about their own relationship to the social construct of gender, or how a person identifies themselves in relation to the categories of men and women. So, gender is so tied to how we express ourselves that it can even impact the words we use every day. So, when we think about the different ways we learn and use language, we can see that there are many different factors at play. Gender is a category of identity that can make a profound difference in the relationships that we form to language over time. So let's proceed to the violations of gender fair language. So sexist language is a tool that reinforces unequal gender relations through sex role stereotypes, macroaggressions, and sexual harassment. So what is violations of gender fair language? So it is the use of language which devalues members of one sex, almost invariably women, and thus fosters gender inequality. It discriminates against women by rendering them invisible or trivializing them, at the same time that it perpetuates notions of male supremacy. So, language can be used to abuse, such as in the case of sexual harassment, or to perpetuate stereotypes. It is inherently discriminatory language, either written or spoken, that implies an unjustified sexual bias against a group or an individual, usually women but sometimes men. So, what is the purpose of sexist language? So, sexist language is language which includes or excludes one sex or the other, or which suggests that one sex is superior to the other. For example, traditionally, he, him, and his were used to refer to both sexes, male and female. But nowadays, many people feel that this makes she, her, and hers seem less important or inferior. Okay, so what are the effects of sexist language? So, sexist language is a way of perpetuating inequality between the sexes. It perpetuates images of dominance and submission, stereotypes of weak, trivialize, sexualize women and powerful men. It subtly reminds women of their place as a soft, submissive girl whose identity is defined by a man. So you can avoid sexist language by using passive voice or plural constructions, by eliminating pronouns, or by switching to direct address. Whenever possible, you should choose from among non-sexist terms that are increasingly available. So, sexism in language. So, the use of language which devalues members of one sex, almost invariably women, thus foster gender inequality.
An example of sexism in language is the use of genetic masculine, subsuming all humanity in the terms of man, father, brother, master. So, example, current usage and alternative. So, the current usage of man, its alternative is human being, human. Mankind, men, its alternative is humankind, people. Forefather. Its alternative is ancestor. Layman, layperson and specialist. Manpower, personal labor force. Man-made, manufactured, synthetic, artificial. Early man, early people, early men and women, and then or human beings. Another example of sexism in language is the singular masculine pronouns he, his, and him. So the first current usage is if a customer has a complaint, send him to the service desk. And then its alternative is customers with complaints should be sent to the service desk. Second, each student should bring his notebooks to class every day. Its alternative is all students should bring their notebooks to class every day. Third, the handicapped child may be able to feed himself. Its alternative is handicapped children may be able to feed themselves. And last, when a reporter covers a controversial story, he has a responsibility to present both sides of the issue. And its alternative is when reporters cover controversial stories, they have responsibility to present both sides of the issue.
Hello everyone, good day and good afternoon. So this is the continuation of our topic for today's class discussion. So Philippine culture and languages. So I am Neño here, Cabugnason. So we're talking about the Philippine culture and language. So Philippines or Tagalog is mainly gender neutral without gendered characteristics or titles for men or women. So Philippine culture and language Filipino or Tagalog is mainly gender neutral without, as what I said, without gender characteristics or titles for men or women. So that's it. So words that came from another cultural which were adopted after 400 years colonization, the values and the shaping of the education system years of were influenced by Western powers and ideals. So Filipinos portray a mix and identities and infusion of both native and foreign perspectives and values. So Filipinos have an adaptation from the Filipinos values and also from other foreign people which colonized the Philippines on the past years. So identities and naming things. Let's proceed to identities and naming things. So language is used to define that is feminine, masculine, and outside feminine or masculine. So naming things give them power. So identities, as like what I said, so identities and naming things and the previous characteristics define sex and gender and explain how these points can help reflect one's identity. Language is used to define what is feminine, masculine, and outside feminine for masculine. So it is a tool for understanding the world as well as forming and describing people and things. Language gives a person the power to define oneself and the external world and one's in it. So it provides a definition of others as well and one's relationship with them. So through language, people can reflect on their own identities and battles and definitions society impose on them on gendered. So naming things give them the power. So for example, sexual harassment was never seen as an issue as it was never given as was unwanted behavior in the workplace, but it was seen as names on one's gender is a form of externalized social control. So common themselves of this sexist language are the commercialization of the trivialization of women. So these sexist portrayals of women extend the advertising industry, so exterminating industry and the arts. The normalization of sexism makes violence against women and children accepted or tolerable. So using language for gendered stereotyping can contribute to sexism by reinforcing the idea that certain words and traits should only be associated with the specific gender. So how people related to each other on the day-to-day basis, reinforcing behaviors, both positive and negative. So, to call someone stupid every day could have an effect on his or her potential. In turns language through its repetition of roles, stereotypes, and adjectives aspects how one person enacts his or her capabilities, constantly mocking or joking about women LGBT, sexualizing them and making them appear weak would indeed make them internalize these ideas. So inherently sexist culture. That being said, language is not depends on a specific culture. Similarly, the attitude of towards a certain gender may influence the world's use, creating sexism and is perpetrator of language. Language is both a symptom and it is the very telling of how a society sees a certain gender. So that is about the sexism. So as we move forward towards gender fair language, so the use of gender fair language in educational institutions and the removal of the sexism language is imperative to gender responsiveness is currently being advocated. So towards a gender fair language, the use of gender fair language is to educational institution, and the removal of sexism language imperative to gender responsiveness is currently being advocated. So Gabriela General Assembly binding women for reforms, integrity, equality, leadership, and action. Women's Party National President and Party List Representative Liz Maza called for a ban of sexism language in all official communication and documents in the House of Representatives. So, the creation of the comprehensive gender fair language policy and the evaluation of the effectiveness of gender fair language in the institutions are indicators for gender fair institutions. So, these actions are small steps one can take it ensuring that institutions are indeed gender fair. So language then is more than just arrangement of the words. Cultures and values come from language and vice versa. Language also a process that represents one's views, beliefs, and experience. So must be changed to reflect the changes in the world as well as free from bias, since words can affect how a person sees oneself and others around him or her. So I think that would be all for my discussion and for my given topic assigned by me. Thank you and God bless.